This module will provide an insight to the types of risk posed to international business. As we shall see, risks may stem from more than one source. After going through this lesson, you shall be able to 1. Know the concept and nature of risk, 2. Describe various types and sources of risk, 3. Explain how risks impact international business, and lastly, analyze management of international business risks. Risk levels might be higher in foreign markets. When companies decide to engage in international business, they also take on additional risks as well as opportunities. Doing business internationally has often been the advice given to companies looking to increase and diversify their activities. The diversification of business has an objective to reduce the overall risk inherent in business. However, although the benefits of doing business internationally are widely accepted hypothesis, many companies are still hesitant to expand business abroad. There are many environmental factors facing international business. Besides market-based factors, business can be affected by other non-market forces which are not only numerous but various in forms. Despite such risk and given the global choices available in international business, an increasing number of companies explore and try to conquer foreign markets. Highlighting the risks involved is important for making a more informed decision. In this module, we will discuss the different type of risks faced by parties in international business as well as how parties mitigate these risks has been focused upon. Concept and nature of risk. People generally understand risk with loss or damage. Generally, the terms risk and uncertainty are treated as synonyms by business journalists, but they are technically not the same. Businesses rely on a predictable and stable mechanism. Expanding businesses to the international arena is not difficult if companies are aware of the steps involved. Risk means that there is a possibility that the companies won't get adequate benefits for their venture. It is a kind of an exposure to risk to the company's bottom line. When the companies are involved in business, they need to consider the kind of events that could pose a risk to the business and take steps to mitigate them. Doing business internationally involves risks beyond the normal risks of doing business domestically. Risk levels might be higher in foreign markets. Risk factors are multiplied when companies venture into international business. Whether companies are importing materials or exporting finished products, they will encounter new issues. Besides late or non-delivery of goods, international business also faces country risk, which is commonly construed as political risk, also known as geopolitical risk. Related to this is foreign exchange risk, which poses another challenge to the companies. Such associated risks may sometimes make it difficult to maintain constant and have reliable expectations of getting profits. Let's look at the nature of risks. There has been a change in the nature of risk. In this age of globalization and advancement of technology, leading to revolutionary changes in communication and transportation, has pushed forward the development of international business. Risk is the possibility of an event happening, and it is often associated with negative outcomes. No matter how attractive the economic prospects of a particular country or region are, doing business there might prove to be unprofitable. This is particularly the case when unforeseen incidences in the non-economic sphere lead to the failure of profitable assets. Risk in the international business are the main obstacles to the successful growth to the same. Many factors such as tariffs, cost of delay, differences in the legal system, etc., generate risks and uncertainty. Such risks in international business play an important role in the decision-making process of the companies. A key component in the decision-making process is timeliness. When people involved in international business do not know each other and operate in different countries, with each country having its own rules and regulations, the risk increases a lot. In fact, such risks are substantial for small entrepreneurs, as one payment default or rejection of exported material may be fatal for the small enterprises. In today's world, many new forms of risk are of interconnected nature. Risk, crisis, and disaster. Such discrete events trigger other problems. Each of these illustrates the transboundary nature of risk and the potential that they have to cascade through time and space. As such, risk analysis and knowledge of diversity in the world of international business has a great practical importance because it allows to identify the tools and policies to reduce or eliminate the risk and the damage that they cause. Given the unpredictable nature of risks, it is necessary to know them very well. While negotiating a business agreement, companies must limit the possibility of random events that could cause an unfavorable turn of the agreement. Let's look at the types and sources of risk. As with cost, the risks of doing business in a country are determined by a number of political, economic, and legal factors. The buyers and sellers that are engaged in international business may experience one or more of the following risks. 1. Buyer's acceptance, insolvency, or credit risk. 2. Cultural risk. 3. Documentation risk. 4. Economic risk. 5. Foreign exchange risk. 6. Interest rate risk. 7. Knowledge inadequacy. 8. Legal risk. 9. Political or sovereign risk. 10. Seller's performance risk. And lastly, transit risk. The above risks of international business may be categorized in the following form. 1. Commercial risk, covering market risk or failure, products or advertisements not appealing to the foreign customers, etc. Economic risks, associated with macroeconomic policy changes, including changes in fiscal or monetary policies, tax changes, high rates of inflation, balance of payments position, foreign exchange reserves, etc. Financial risks, which connote adverse movements in currency exchange rates, credit risks. Fourth, political or sovereign risks, which include foreign governments expropriating the firm's local assets, war, terrorism, revolution, interfering with business, imposition of restrictions on importers' ability to pay for imports. Fifth, other risk, that is operational risk, transit risk, reputation risks, physical risk and natural risks, etc. Commercial risks. This risk refers to the firm's potential loss or failure from poorly developed or executed business strategies, tactics or procedures. Companies may make wrong choices in areas like the identification of business partners, timing of market entry, pricing, creation of product features and promotional themes. Despite the existence of such failures, in domestic market, the risks are usually more costly in foreign business. Market risk. It is related to uncertainty about future income due to adverse changes in prices and rates in different markets. It also refers to the loss in value of the bank or fund's portfolio caused by changes in price or price related factors. A bank's lack of ability to honor its responsibilities, a seller's inability to provide the required quantity or quality of goods. Economic risks. This risk is concerned with events including economic mismanagement. It can cause drastic changes in country's business environment that may adversely affect the profitability and other objectives of the companies. One of the major problems arising from economic mismanagement has been inflation. There have been many attempts to quantify countries' economic risk. This risk includes the following: change in economic control, trade embargoes, economic conditions, that is demand, supply related factors, etc. Financial risk. Direct financial risks are related to how the business handles money. Coverage of financial risks is very wide and varied. The examples of some such risks are given below. Credit risks means not getting promised payment from the buyer even after receiving the goods. Insolvency of the buyer, non-acceptance and protracted default. This is also referred as counterparty risk. Other risks included in the category of financial risks are changes in currency's exchange rate, exchange control regulations, lack of foreign currency, interest rate, equity price and volatility levels. Currency risk is nothing but the change in exchange rate negatively affecting the exporter or overseas importer. Foreign exchange risk occurs when the value of investment fluctuates due to changes in a currency's exchange rate. Another risk inherent in foreign markets, especially in emerging markets, is liquidity risk. Liquidity risk is the risk of not being able to sell the stock quickly enough once a sell order is entered. Political, sovereign or legal risk. This risk is largely concerned with the complications to which companies are exposed owing to adverse political decisions that may be different from the anticipated result of an existing contract. In general, there are two types of political risk: macro risk and micro risk. Macro risk refers to adverse actions that will affect all foreign firms, such as expropriation or insurrection, whereas micro risks refer to adverse actions that will only affect a certain industrial sector or business, such as corruption and prejudicial actions against companies from foreign countries, prejudicial actions against companies from foreign countries. Some of the examples of political risk are changes in the policies of the government, non-renewal of import and export licenses, the imposition of an import ban after the delivery of the goods, occurrence of war, the inability of the government of a country to pay off its debts. Legal risks are viewed by businesses as an enormous dark shadow that can threaten the company in a variety of ways. To comply with the burden of increasing regulations is very challenging. Risks also arise if contractual agreements such as leases and employment contracts are not properly followed. Countries differ in their laws as well as in their implementation of these laws. E. Risks of terrorism. Lately, there has been increasing concern about threats posed by terrorism and violence, as well as data breaches and viruses. F. Intellectual property risks, also called IPR. The more important the IPR is to business, the higher the risk. It is important to protect the IPR to avoid destructive repercussions on the overall profitability of the business. G. Country risks. These refer to the loss that may arise from conducting business in a specific foreign country. This risk is related to the possibility of changes in the business environment, like changes in socio-political scenario, financial and other policy regulations. Such changes adversely impact the business and reduce the profitability of doing business in that country. OECD undertakes a country risk classification among member nations. Other risks. Such risks are very difficult to categorize. They include risks from the environment, difficulties in maintaining a trained staff that has up-to-date skills, health and safety risks, etc. A. Compliance risk. Risks associated with compliance are those subject to legislative or bureaucratic rule and regulations, or those associated with best practices for investment purposes. B. Location or neighborhood risks. This is related to the spillover effects which happen due to some problems in a particular region or in a country's trading partner or in countries with similar identical features. In this context, geographical position of a country provides the common measure of location risk. Trading partners, trade blocs, regions, agreements also connote location risk. C. Logistical risks. When purchasing goods and materials necessary to the operation of international business, there may be uncertainty about the supplier's ability to deliver on time and within the budget. Natural risks. This risk takes place due to the various kinds of natural catastrophes. Such forces are external to the firm and are not controllable. Risks related to climate change and greenhouse gas restrictions, along with government incentives for alternative non-conventional sources of energy. E. Operational risks. This risk results from internal failures and has a very wide domain and refers to the threat of losses from business system or process failure. That is, the business internal processes, people or system fail unexpectedly. Mechanical and human operation faults in procedural design and system function, legal risk, and all miscalculations from trading and settlement are included in this category of risk. It is generally observed that such kind of risks is the hardest to model and predict, particularly the human side. Operational risk can also result from overseen external events such as transportation systems breaking down or a supplier failing to deliver goods. In short, directly or indirectly is the risk of loss resulting from inadequate way of managing internal processes, people, systems or external events. For example, economic conditions, changes in banking, technological, etc. F. Physical risk. Common physical risks are fire and explosion. Some such risks are related to a particular kind of business like chemicals, where hazardous material spills such as acid, gas, toxic fumes and poisonous waste are very common and enhance security concerns. G. Reputation risk. There are many facets of this risk. However, the most common is the loss of company's reputation or community standing might result from product failures, lawsuits or negative publicity. It is well known that reputations take time to build but can be lost in a day. In the contemporary world, the advent of social networking can adversely affect earnings of companies. One negative blog post or product review can spread online in a flash and change the direction of a company. It is already known as a rule of thumb that states prestigious reputation, great service. However, one must keep in mind that relying on reputation of specialists requires proper check to avoid either unfounded or out of date reputation. H. Strategic risk. These risks result directly from operating within a specific industry at a specific time. Therefore, shifts in consumer preferences or emerging technologies may make companies' product line obsolete. I. Transit or carriage risk. Transit risk is related to the risk of goods being damaged or possible loss of cargo in the transit or unusual delay in delivering the goods at the destination due to delay in transit. If this risk is not properly handled, it may result in heavy replacement cost. This becomes a part of performance risk as well. Unpredictable international or domestic business environment. many of the risk factors are not within the company's control and could adversely affect their business. Socio-political risk is an important part of assessing country risk. A higher level of democracy in a country means a lower level of country risk, which experience higher trade flows. While any country can in theory pose a risk, but some countries offer a more stable business environment than others. It is also to be noted that the different types of risk discussed above are not exclusive in themselves. Some of the risk factors are of overlapping nature. Impact of risks on international business. In identifying the risks for a specific business, it is important to cover every aspect of the business, from the most observable risks common to many companies to any distinctive risks a particular business might have. Such process of identification may embrace issues relating to legal, physical, financial, human and intellectual and technology risk. In this context, it would be valuable to consider business risk as being non-entrepreneurial, such as fires and floods, and entrepreneurial, such as economic forecasting and product development. Political decisions by various leaders of the government pertaining to fiscal and monetary policies like taxes, currency valuation, trade tariffs or barriers, investment, wage levels, labor laws, environmental regulations and development priorities always affect the business environment and profitability. The impact of political risk is considered to be long term because the risk rises over time given the greater potential for events and changes over time. In the same way, various non-economic factors also influence business. For example, political disruptions such as terrorism, riots, coups, civil wars, international wars and even political elections that may change the ruling government can dramatically affect businesses' ability to operate. The operations may be disrupted by severe weather events, natural disasters, human error and similar events. It is important to take special care for safety, business controls and environmental risk. Substantial liabilities and other adverse impacts could result if the management systems and controls do not function as intended. The ability to insure against such risks is limited by the capacity of the applicable insurance markets, which may not be sufficient. Unlike a strategic risk or a financial risk, there is no return on operational risks. Until recently, governments were able to directly enforce the rules and regulations based on their political and legal philosophies. But the improvement in technology in the form of internet has started to change this. Now, buyers and sellers have easier access to each other. However, countries still have the authority to regulate and compel businesses into abiding their rules and regulations. Changes in consumers' preferences or other market forces can put the company in danger. Risk is, and perhaps always has been, a borderless phenomenon. It is important to consider fundamental sources of risks and lack of control in modern corporate businesses and not just the systems. Today, it is more difficult for many businesses to be able to meet the expenses relating to risk management, although the need for risk management is greater now. Businesses have become more vulnerable in the last decade because society has become even more litigious in many areas. Generally, governments intervene in business for a combination of factors like cultural, social, economic and political. Side by side, governments also try to influence business and reward a particular government or country for getting political support on important international issues. Environmental regulations have become increasingly relevant in recent years. Many countries have higher environmental standards and not considered friendly to certain industries. Thus, proper respect must be shown to native sites regarding the environment, as this will help smoothen expansion of business. While evaluating the impact of risks on business, it is always advisable to first look at the different political, legal, social and cultural systems prevailing in different countries. Every business builds a risk register with relative probability and associated impact. The different risk impacts and frequencies need to be dealt with by different people with various risk management skills. This varies from company to company and from risk culture to risk culture. Where losses occur, these should be recorded in the loss database. Management of international business risks. Companies face political and economic risks whenever they conduct business overseas, but there are ways to lessen the risk. Although political risk is extremely difficult to quantify, companies must examine and be aware of the potential for political risks by closely examining the location's history, political institutions and political forces at work in the region. The first step in risk management is to identify the risk. There are ways in which a company can overcome some of the risk exposures in a foreign country. In the context of financial risk, it is good to remember that investment risk management is an art and not a science in many ways. In recent times, risk management has become a natural part of the process of wealth creation, and this is a very sought after skill. Some of the important skills for managing risk are discussed here. The variety of risk is so wide and impending damage so profound that risk management has become high profile in itself. As such, MNCs do not pay lip service to operational risk because of the high impact when the hazards happen. Managing risk requires skills combining financial training and an innate sense to identify suspect investment opportunities or partners. This means having a good nose for business, intuition and experience instead of paper qualifications. In addition to having adequate insurance to cover losses from some risks, businesses try to reduce the risk with effective planning. It is important to take into account the working of Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, which is also called MIGA, when thinking of foreign investment. This is a World Bank agency and it has a team of experts who help create an insurance policy customized to the needs and requirements for promoting investment and growth in politically unstable areas. One way to manage logistical risk is to diversify the supply chain by spreading orders over several suppliers. To tackle the risk involved in a deal in a manner to get success, the importer or exporter must first comprehend the risk tolerance of their companies. Having gone through proper assessment and identified the nature of the risk involved in a potential deal transaction, the firm can develop measures to reduce, manage or optimize the risks. Sound risk management requires taking government agencies into confidence and acquires necessary abilities to prevent, control and minimize damages resulting from various types of incidents. In the context of management of risk, it is important to understand the complex mosaic in which the causal factors occur. Efficient management of risks necessitates a proper understanding of transmission mechanisms and escalation of risks which cut across disciplinary and structural boundaries. As such, the interplay between disciplinary perspectives on risk can provide awareness and new insights that may have a relevance to various types of risks along with their prevention and management. The global financial crisis of 2008 provided several examples of the pervasive and transboundary nature of risks within modern societies. To meet the challenge of strategic risks, it is needed to put measures in place to constantly solicit feedback so that changes will be made on time. In addition to external economic and political factors, the future business operations also depend on the ability to manage successfully those factors that are at least in part within the control of the companies. The extent to which they manage these factors will impact the performance of the companies. The moral of the lesson is that risk management decisions should be based upon preventing as much risk as possible, although complete eradication is not realistic for everything, and or mitigating risks to a level that is at least somewhat tolerable for the business. According to Todd Macomber, there will always be risks or events that cannot be fully prevented or contained, so it is important for businesses to develop effective response and recovery plans. Let us summarize. International business is operated in a more uncertain decision-making environment than in domestic business. Investing in foreign markets takes an additional risk as well as opportunities. 2. Uncertainty creating risks make it difficult to assign reliable probabilities to factors that influence the outcome of specific strategies. Conversely, if probabilities can be confidently assigned, businesses may be dealing with predictable risks. 3. Businesses face more risk when doing business abroad, but knowing these are the keys to start off on a strong footing. 4. International businesses are subject to certain commercial, economic, financial and political risks that most domestic businesses will never even have to consider. Foreign currency, exchange rates, political climates and events, international trade laws and tariffs, and an array of unexpected variables must all be accounted for prior to doing business abroad. Fifth, factors creating risk are market factors, government and political factors, excess limitations, restrictions on doing business, lack of legal certainty, regulatory and litigation risks, volatile nature of the exchange rate. Sixth, political risk transpires when a country's government unexpectedly changes its policy which adversely affect the foreign company. Political risks for international businesses include nationalization and the seizure of assets, war and terrorism, and the failure of local authorities to enforce contracts in the region. Such risks can affect the operations and profitability of a business as directly and quickly as any financial, physical or market risk factor. Seventh, any of the risks can mean big problems and big expenses for the business. All risks make it difficult to maintain constant and reliable profit for the companies. All in all, regardless of the type of political risk that a company faces, companies usually will end up losing a lot of money if they are unprepared for such adverse situations. 8. One of the major risks in international business is the transaction costs. This cost varies greatly depending on which foreign market business is conducted. Environmental regulations have become increasingly significant to international companies in recent years. 9. To become knowledgeable about a foreign market to the point where the companies can generate good returns, the process involves spending significant amounts of time and money on research and analysis. 10. Risk management is a much more comprehensive task. Risk is broadly defined as the probability of an unforeseen incident and its resulting consequences. Risk management is the identification, assessment and economic control of those risks that can endanger the assets and earning capacity of a business. 11. Managing risks is important and companies are supposed to adopt strategies for conducting international businesses. Some of the steps that a company may follow are identifying the issue. For example, protectionism, environmental standards, human rights, workers' rights, etc., and important institutions and key individuals. 2. Formulation of strategies, both objectives and alternatives. Selection and determining the impact of the most appropriate strategy and its implementation.